In the dim light of our modest kitchen, the words cut through the silence like a knife. "This food is garbage, Eliza. Can't you do anything right?" Marcus sneered, his eyes cold and dismissive. I bit my lip, stifling a retort. The last thing I wanted was to escalate the tension, especially with Lydia and Robert, his ailing parents, in the next room. "My name is Eliza. I'm 36, and I've been tethered to this loveless marriage for 5 agonizing years. We met at a community event. I was 31 and Marcus was 33. After losing my parents in a tragic accident, I was a lone ship adrift at sea. Marcus, with his charming facade, seemed like a safe harbor, but that facade crumbled quickly after our wedding. The early days were a whirlwind. Marcus rushed the relationship, eager to wear the badge of marriage like his friends. 6 months into dating, and we were already discussing wedding plans. His parents, Lydia and Robert, welcomed me with open arms, filling the void left by my own parents' passing. Lydia, with her gentle smile, helped me with the wedding preparations. I was more than willing to live with them after the marriage, grateful for their warmth. "Eliza, your coffee is the only decent thing in this house," Marcus's father, Robert, would often say. My father was a coffee connoisseur, and his love for it had rubbed off on me. Blending my own beans became a comforting ritual, a connection to my past. Robert's appreciation for my coffee was a balm to my soul, reminding me of happier times with my father. Marcus, however, couldn't care less. He would often remark that instant coffee tasted better than anything I brewed. His indifference wasn't just limited to coffee, it extended to everything I did. Lydia, on the other hand, shared my passion for cooking. "I've always dreamt of cooking with a daughter," she would say, her eyes sparkling with joy. Cooking with her was a respite from the constant Cold War with Marcus. Life took a harsh turn 2 years ago when Lydia fell ill. Though not bedridden, her health required frequent rest. I stepped up, taking care of her as best I could. Marcus's contribution? Increased hours at work and a constant barrage of complaints about the gloomy atmosphere at home. Then came the bombshell. I found lipstick on Marcus's shirt, a perfume scent I didn't recognize. Confronted, he admitted to an affair. He blamed it on the depressing home environment and his need to escape. I was stunned, not just by his betrayal, but by his brazen lack of remorse. Robert was furious when he found out. He reprimanded Marcus, who seemed repentant at the time. I chose not to divorce him, not out of love, but out of concern for Lydia. I couldn't bear the thought of leaving her in Marcus's uncaring hands. But the real shock came on the day of Robert's retirement. Marcus's fixation on his father's pension was disgusting. His sense of entitlement boiled over when he learned that there was no inheritance for him. The subsequent verbal abuse intensified, revealing the full extent of his vile nature. Marcus started working even more overtime, likely a cover for his continued infidelity. I found myself trapped, unable to leave for fear of what would happen to Lydia and Robert. Marcus's parents were kinder to me than he ever was, and the thought of abandoning them was unbearable. "Eliza, you're just a glorified maid," Marcus spat out one evening, his words dripping with contempt. Tears welled up in my eyes, but I swallowed them back. I had to stay strong, for Lydia and Robert's sake. But with each passing day, my resolve wavered. How much longer could I endure this living nightmare? The days melted into each other, each as gray and unremarkable as the one before. Lydia's health was deteriorating, and I found myself more nurse than daughter-in-law. Marcus was hardly ever home, and when he was, his presence was like a dark cloud looming over the house. "I don't know why you bother, Eliza," Marcus sneered one evening as I prepared Lydia's medication. "She's just a burden now. We should have put her in a home." I clenched my jaw, the pill bottle in my hand trembling. "She's your mother, Marcus. How can you say such things?" I shot back, my voice laced with disbelief. He shrugged, an ugly smirk playing on his lips. "Why not? It's the truth. And let's not forget dear old Dad, another dead weight." I turned away, hiding the tears that threatened to spill. Lydia's soft voice called out from the other room. "Is everything all right, Eliza?" "Yes, Lydia. Just a moment," I replied, struggling to keep my voice steady. The betrayal stung deeper each day. Marcus's affair was an open secret now. He didn't even bother to hide it. The lipstick stains, the late nights, the careless whispers on the phone, it was all a blatant display of his infidelity. One particularly harsh evening, as I served dinner, Marcus looked at me with disdain. You know, I met someone interesting today, he began, his words dripping with malice. Someone young, vibrant. It's not like some people who just wither away at home. I set down the plates, my hands shaking. Are you trying to hurt me, Marcus? Is that your goal? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. He leaned back, a cruel smile spreading across his face. Maybe. It's fun to see you squirm. You're so pathetic, clinging to this sham of a marriage. I recoiled, as if struck. His words were like venom, poisoning the already tainted air between us. I excused myself quickly, retreating to Lydia's room, where her kind eyes and warm smile offered a small comfort. As I sat by Lydia's bedside, reading to her, Marcus's words echoed in my mind. Was I really just clinging to a hopeless situation? The reality of my life, bound to a man who saw me as nothing more than a caretaker for his parents, hit me hard. I felt trapped, caught in a web of duty and misplaced loyalty. That night, as I lay in bed, a plan began to form in my mind. I couldn't continue like this. Something had to change. I knew it wouldn't be easy, but for the first time in a long time, a spark of hope flickered within me. I would find a way out of this nightmare, not just for myself, but for Lydia and Robert too. The thought of revenge against Marcus, a man who had shown nothing but cruelty, brought a bitter smile to my lips. The game was about to change, and this time I would be the one in control. The winter chill seeped into the house, but it was nothing compared to the icy atmosphere Marcus created every time he walked in. The tension was palpable, a constant reminder of the career my life had become. Eliza, when are you going to learn to cook something decent? Marcus scoffed one evening, pushing his plate away in disgust. You're as useless in the kitchen as you are in everything else. I bristled at his words, my hands clenching into fists under the table. I'm doing the best I can, Marcus. If you're so dissatisfied, why don't you cook for yourself? I retorted, my patience wearing thin. He laughed, a harsh grating sound. Me, cook? That's your job. You're the wife, after all. Or have you forgotten your place? I bit back a sharp reply, knowing it would only fuel his cruelty. Instead, I cleared the dishes in silence, my mind racing. His constant belittlement was unbearable. I needed to escape. But how? Later that week, I overheard Marcus on a call. His hushed tones were filled with excitement. Yeah, I'll be there. Can't wait to see you, he whispered, unaware that I was listening from the hallway. The revelation stung, but it wasn't a surprise. His affair wasn't just a fling. It was ongoing. The knowledge solidified my resolve. I couldn't let this man control my life any longer. The next day, I confided in Lydia, pouring out my heart. Her eyes filled with tears as she listened. Oh, Eliza, I'm so sorry. You don't deserve this. You've been nothing but a blessing to us. Her words were a balm to my wounded soul. I can't stay here, Lydia. Not with Marcus. I need to find a way out, I said, determination stealing my voice. Lydia nodded, her hand gripping mine. I understand, dear. You have to do what's best for you. Don't worry about us. We'll manage. But the thought of leaving them in Marcus's uncaring hands gnawed at me. I needed a plan, one that would ensure their safety and give me the freedom I so desperately craved. That evening, as I lay in bed, a plan began to take shape. I would gather evidence of Marcus's infidelity, his neglect, his cruelty. I would build a case so strong that he would have no choice but to let me go, and perhaps even ensure some financial security for Lydia and Robert. The thought of turning the tables on Marcus, of making him pay for his actions, filled me with a sense of purpose. I started documenting everything. The late nights, the phone calls, the derogatory comments. Each piece of evidence was a step towards my liberation. I knew it wouldn't be easy, but I was ready. Marcus had underestimated me for too long. It was time for him to see just how strong Eliza could be. December arrived, bringing with it a biting cold that mirrored the frostiness in our home. Marcus's indifference had grown into outright disdain, each interaction laced with venom. The holiday season, which should have been filled with warmth and joy, felt hollow and oppressive under his shadow. One evening, as we sat in stony silence, Marcus dropped a bombshell. I'm going to Hawaii for Christmas with some friends. Can't waste my holidays in this depressing place. I stared at him, disbelief mingling with a rising sense of anger. You're leaving for Christmas? What about your parents? They need us, I protested, my voice tinged with frustration. He shrugged, his indifference cutting deeper than his words. Not my problem. You're here, aren't you? Besides, I need a break from all this. He gestured around the room, his eyes cold. The injustice of his words stung. Here I was, caring for his parents, managing our home, and he was abandoning us for a holiday. The unfairness of it all burned in my chest. "Who are you going with?" I asked, a sinking feeling in my stomach. Marcus smirked, a cruel glint in his eyes. "That's none of your business. Maybe I'll find someone who actually knows how to have fun." His insinuation was clear, and it cut deep. I felt a mix of hurt and anger, but above all, an overwhelming sense of betrayal. It was obvious he was meeting his mistress. The realization hit me hard. I was truly alone in this. Christmas Eve arrived, and with Marcus gone, the house was quieter, but it wasn't peaceful. Lydia and Robert were saddened by their son's absence, their spirits dampened by his neglect. I tried to lift their mood, decorating the house and preparing a festive meal, but the joy of the season was overshadowed by Marcus's betrayal. As we sat down to dinner, Lydia reached for my hand. "Thank you, Eliza, for everything. We don't know what we'd do without you." I squeezed her hand, fighting back tears. "It's my pleasure. You're my family, too." That night, as I lay in bed, the weight of my situation felt crushing. Marcus's betrayal, his parents' disappointment, my own loneliness, it all bore down on me. But as I lay there, a fierce determination took root within me. I wouldn't let Marcus win. I would fight for a better life, for myself and for Lydia and Robert. They deserved better, and so did I. The new year was approaching, and with it the promise of new beginnings. I would make sure of it. The days following Christmas were a blur of activity and planning. I was determined to change the course of my life. One evening, as I sat with Lydia and Robert discussing the future, an idea began to take shape. "Eliza, we can't let you sacrifice your life for us. You've done more than enough," Lydia said, her voice filled with concern. I shook my head, my resolve firm. "I can't just leave you with Marcus. He doesn't care about anyone but himself." Robert, who had been quiet, spoke up. "We've been thinking, Eliza. Maybe it's time we took matters into our own hands." I looked at them, puzzled. "What do you mean?" They exchanged a glance before Robert continued. "We've been pretending to be more ill than we actually are. We wanted to see how Marcus would react, to truly understand his character." I was stunned. "You mean you're not as sick as you've been letting on?" Lydia nodded. "It's true. We needed to know if Marcus would step up. But he's only shown his true colors, selfish and uncaring. The revelation was shocking, but it sparked an idea. What if we use this to our advantage? What if we turn the tables on Marcus?" Robert and Lydia listened intently as I laid out my plan. We would continue the charade of their illness, building up a case against Marcus for his neglect. We would document everything, his absence, his indifference, his affair. And when the time was right, we would confront him, armed with undeniable evidence of his failures as a son and a husband. The following weeks were a whirlwind of covert planning and careful documentation. Marcus, oblivious in his selfishness, continued his neglectful ways, providing us with all the evidence we needed. Then, one fateful evening, Marcus returned home, his usual sneer in place. "I see the invalids are still sucking the life out of this house," he remarked callously. I bristled at his words, but maintained my composure. "They're your parents, Marcus. They deserve your respect and care." He laughed, a harsh, mocking sound. "Respect? For what? They're nothing but a burden." I locked eyes with him, my voice steady. "You're going to regret those words, Marcus, sooner than you think." His smirk faltered for a moment, a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. But it was quickly replaced by his usual arrogance. "We'll see about that, Eliza." As he walked away, I knew our plan was working. Marcus was unaware of the storm that was brewing, a storm that would soon sweep away the facade of his life, leaving him exposed and vulnerable. The moment of reckoning was close at hand, and I was ready. For Lydia, for Robert, and for myself, I was ready to fight back. The day of reckoning arrived sooner than expected. Marcus, as usual, was oblivious to the storm that was about to hit him. I had gathered enough evidence of his neglect, his affairs, and his utter lack of empathy. Lydia and Robert were ready too, prepared to confront their son with the truth. It was a cold evening when we decided it was time. Marcus walked in, his usual arrogant self, not noticing the tense atmosphere. Lydia, Robert, and I were sitting in the living room, a folder of evidence on the coffee table. "Marcus, we need to talk," I said, my voice steady despite the pounding of my heart. He rolled his eyes. What now? More complaints about how hard your life is? No, I replied. It's about how you failed as a son and a husband. He scoffed, but the smirk faded as he noticed the serious expressions on his parents' faces. What's this about? He asked, a hint of unease creeping into his voice. Sit down, Marcus. It's time you heard some hard truths, Robert said, his voice firm. The confrontation was intense. We laid out everything, the evidence of his affairs, his neglect, and his cruelty. Marcus tried to deny it, but the proof was irrefutable. His facade crumbled, revealing the coward beneath. You can't do this to me. Marcus stammered, his usual confidence shattered. You did this to yourself, Lydia said, her voice filled with disappointment. The final blow was when I handed him the divorce papers. I'm done, Marcus. I deserve better than this, than you. He looked at the papers, then at me, disbelief and panic in his eyes. You can't leave me. You have nowhere to go. I have myself, and that's enough. I won't be your doormat anymore. Marcus was defeated, his arrogance turned to desperation. But there was no turning back. The truth had set me free, and there was no sympathy left in my heart for him. The next morning Marcus left, his tail between his legs, a shadow of the man he once pretended to be. Lydia, Robert, and I watched him go, a sense of relief washing over us. It was over. The years of suffering, the pain, the neglect, it was finally over. I stood there with Lydia and Robert, feeling lighter than I had in years. We had faced the dragon and emerged victorious. It was the beginning of a new chapter, one filled with hope and the promise of a better tomorrow. In the wake of Marcus's departure, a profound sense of peace settled over the house. Lydia, Robert, and I embarked on a journey of healing, leaving the shadows of the past behind us. The house, once a battlefield of tension and misery, became a sanctuary of warmth and mutual support. One morning, as we enjoyed a quiet breakfast, Lydia broached a subject close to my heart. Eliza, you always had a dream, didn't you? About opening a cafe? I smiled, surprised she remembered. Yes, but that was a long time ago. Life took a different turn. Robert chimed in, his eyes twinkling. What if we told you that it's still possible, that your dream could become a reality? I looked at them, puzzled. What do you mean? We've been thinking, Lydia began, her voice filled with excitement. This house, it's too big for us now. What if we sold it and used the money to help you start your cafe? The idea was overwhelming. But what about you? Where will you live? That's the best part, Robert said, smiling. We found a lovely little cottage not far from here. It's perfect for us, and it'll be close to your cafe. We could be your first customers every morning. The idea of reviving my dream, of starting anew with Lydia and Robert's support, filled me with an indescribable joy. The pain and struggle of the past years seemed to dissolve, giving way to a future brimming with possibilities. Over the next few months, we put our plan into action. The house was sold, and the cottage became Lydia and Robert's new home. With their support and the proceeds from the sale, I found the perfect location for my cafe. We poured our hearts into creating a cozy, welcoming space, a reflection of the new life we were building together. On the opening day of the cafe, I stood behind the counter, the aroma of fresh coffee in the air, a sense of accomplishment washing over me. Lydia and Robert were there, beaming with pride. As customers began to trickle in, Lydia squeezed my hand. You did it, Eliza. You turned your dream into reality. I looked around at the cafe, at Lydia and Robert's smiling faces, and I knew she was right. I had overcome the darkness of my past, and with the support of those who truly cared for me, I had built a new life, a life full of hope and happiness. Marcus was a distant memory, a shadow of a life I had left behind. I had emerged stronger, braver, and with a newfound appreciation for the simple joys of life. As I served my first customers, I knew that this was just the beginning, a new chapter filled with the promise of new adventures, new dreams, and endless possibilities.